Oh, ladies and gentlemen, give it up again for the Tufu Mamau Culture Group. Right. Oh. Thank you, guys. That was really, really wonderful. I really, really enjoyed that. Well, just while we're setting up, we need to get ready for our next speaker, who is the man who championed this whole idea. He had the original idea for the Pacific Research himself. And just while we're setting up, I'll talk about the first time I met Winston. We were working on the project, and then Winston turned up. I didn't know he was going to be there. He found out my dirty secret on the project is that I sit behind a big desk, so I don't wear pants. I've got shorts on, and he saw that I had no pants. But today, when I knew that I was going to meet him again, I thought I would wear pants. So it's a big day for everyone. Hello. That's a full pants reset. Right. Should we get another microphone? You guys. I've been talking the whole time. They could have been here earlier, but that's fine. Just turning it on now. Okay, good. Anyone else? Any other microphones for this? Yes, sir. Oops, sorry. Sorry. Subconscious.
It's actually a press conference.
Oh, it's a press conference. Okay, good. Good. I did some really good jokes at the start. You couldn't miss that. It's one of our acronyms. It's quite popular. Yeah, that SID means, I forgot.
If you prefer not to wear that, you can use the microphones at the
Central Intelligence Department.
Yeah, well, is that the microphone there?
The one that Josh is using is the same channel as this. So
yes, it is time to hear from our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Deputy Prime Minister, the man who has championed the Pacific Reset. Ladies and gentlemen, Winston Peters.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa. Is this microphone on? Can you hear me on the back? No. Actually, Simon Bridges asked that question. Had a meeting in the South Island the other day. He said, "Can you hear me on the back?" And this old guy said, "Yeah, I can, but I'm very happy to change seats with someone who can't." Can you hear me on the back? Yes. Fantastic. Can I, first of all, acknowledge the presence of the Honourable Mark Brown from the Cook Islands, Deputy Prime Minister, and the Minister of Finance, with all those serious responsibilities that the Minister of Finance has. And say to you and your group, including the Prime Minister, welcome back to New Zealand. You know, can I say Pacific Island states are important to us, but all the more so are the realm countries with whom we have a special relationship. And our job is to put the capital S back in the special relationship. And earlier this year, the Prime Minister and a number of us, including a number of you, had the good fortune of going to the Cook Islands as part of the Pacific Mission. And it's a chance today to pass on the coalition government's thanks for the hospitality we received when we were over there. And I must tell you, if you're all looking for an Elvis impersonator, the Honourable Mark Brown's your man. Mind you, Henry Poona's not bad himself. In fact, he used to be called Elvis in the good old days when he was a member of the band. You know, foreign affairs ministers are both discreet and diplomatic. Why are people laughing? Members of the New Zealand NGO community, the New Zealand Coalition Government has just passed its first year of being in government. To our astonishment, of course, it was a matter of considerable comment from the media as though we weren't going to make it. Quite astonishing. They wouldn't have said about any other combination, but this combination, they thought after a year, it deserved a full celebration and acknowledgement. Where are these people from? What have they been observing over the last few years? Anyways, we have moved swiftly to address in the past year what's been a long-standing neglect of our foreign affairs funding and commitment to the Pacific region in particular. I don't like to say neglect or how shall I put it, insufficient attention, but the reality is that when circumstances change, smart countries change as fast as they possibly can. And circumstances have changed, and we need to do two profound things. One is to step up to the challenges and take other countries with us, but at the same time make sure we take the New Zealand taxpayer with us by letting them know what it is, that's at stake right now in our part of the world, indeed all over the world. Things are at stake, and we as a country with a long-standing democratic tradition which goes back to 1854 of having an unbroken election record which only 9 countries can claim, need to step up in this part of the world and bring other countries with us. So in Budget 2018 we announced a $714 million increase in official development assistance. And no, it wasn't for a whole lot of diplomats, as some rather tardy, unkind minds suggested. By the way, we had lost 100 frontline diplomats over the last 9 years. And you cannot train people and dismiss them like that and hold your head up as a country, both at home or abroad or on any forum where you might be. Because it's the fact of life that people look over your shoulders in this business, and if you're not backing your words with financial support, then they'll hear you, but they won't be listening to you. That's the reality. The additional funding secured by this government arrested the decline that would have occurred in New Zealand's GNI ratio, which was tracking down to 0.21%, the lowest in the OECD. Now, we're back to 0.28, but not back to 0.3 where we were back in 2008, 2009. This is not a submission to Grant Robinson, but if you're talking to him, let him know that we've got our sights on something better than we're getting now, and we need it, not just because it be convenient, but because our region needs it, and we as a country need to keep on stepping up. We have also announced our Pacific Reset policy, which is a renewed commitment by this country to our Pacific region. And we need to remind ourselves that the Pacific is in our DNA, which goes back over 1,000 years as a population. Just in case some people around the world forget who we are. We have got a long-term commitment in this part of the world, and our connections go all the way to Hawaii and beyond. That's a fact. We need to remind other countries of that as well. We need to remind other countries, some closer to us, as to why we can be trusted in the Pacific, why we speak the Pacific values, and why we understand its emotions and its sentiments. We've got a proud history of standing up for fairness, good governance, democracy, the rule of law, human rights, a free media, and sustainable and fair economic development. The drivers for our action in relation to the Pacific are clear, including immense challenges such as climate change, non-communicable diseases and barriers to trade, and rising unemployed youth populations with limited opportunities. Our region is also not immune from the pressures of great power competition and the growth in some quarters of authoritarian behaviour, isolationism, and inward-looking, and dare I say it, narrow-minded nationalism that sees have no purpose either for the domestic population or those abroad. These are significant challenges, yet we must not fall into the trap of defining Pacific countries through a negative lens. We have got to strive to ensure that does not happen, because there is a convenient explanation that some people have fallen for in the media, in some cases, sadly in particular, and some politicians who, in the most naked sense, ask questions like, why is liquor cheaper in Niue than in New Zealand? Not very difficult when you think about it. Maybe they're not taxing as much in Niue as we are. Try that for an answer. Well, that is the answer, actually. It's not that we're subsidising Niue's liquor at all. They're just not taxing it as high as our do-gooders in Treasury are doing in this country. They just can't leave working people alone. We need to move beyond talking about providing aid and approaching our Pacific neighbours as beneficiaries. That is the exact wrong course of action to take. To remember also that we are dealing with people, despite their country's size, who are our equal in the same way we expect big countries to treat New Zealand as equal. It goes both ways. We've got to commit ourselves to supporting Pacific countries to stand on their own 2 feet, make their own choices, control their own resources, and have their distinctive voices heard on the global stage. There are immediate outcomes to the New Zealand government's decision. This year, MFAT agreed to a 5-year, $10.5 million partnership agreement with the New Zealand Red Cross in support of their work in the Pacific and globally. We also agreed to $45 million 5-year partnerships with volunteer service abroad, representing a 14% increase in funding. This will enable VSA to expand its work across the Pacific. Our aid funding continues to be shaped by a focused humanitarian lens. For Indonesia, following the recent tragic earthquake and tsunami, we rapidly provided a $5 million package of disaster response support, and we deployed NZ Defence C-130s to provide practical support on the ground, as we did in Tonga earlier on. And this year, New Zealand has contributed more than $12 million to the International Committee of the Red Cross for Humanitarian Crisis in Syria, Yemen, South Sudan, Somalia, and Papua New Guinea. Now, shifting the dial in the Pacific for such projects does require different funding channels than the status quo. For this reason, MFAT is establishing a new Strategic International Development Fund, which will allow New Zealand to be flexible and responsive to the emerging needs of our Pacific partners. Now, to the most important part, which is the importance of civil society, which I always find a fascinating term. Civil society, what does that actually mean? That there are some societies that aren't civil? Or is this sort of a bureaucratic concoction that sounds okay, and so nobody changed it? Anyway, back to the importance of civil society. Ambition and increased funding are critical. In the words of President John F. Kennedy, things do not happen, things are made to happen. With respect to making things happen, this government recognises the importance of the NGOs and the role they play in the Pacific and beyond. Where governments don't have sufficient resources to extend to those in need, NGOs can help to reach the most vulnerable so that no one, or as few as possible, are left behind. They can help communities address challenges and realise economic and social benefits in remote regions. They extend the capacity of a government where, if they weren't there, there'd be no presence of New Zealand support at all. NGOs can be flexible, adaptive and innovative with a local focus. This makes them vital partners for efforts to build sustainable development. NGOs also have a critical role to play in supporting and advocating for a vibrant civil society, that phrase again, and promoting fairness, democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and freedom of the media. Indeed, in an age where there is more information and misinformation than ever before, NGOs have a critical role in supporting constructive and inclusive dialogue in communities. And seeing as we've got the Honourable Mark Brown here, I've got to tell you the Cook Islands is one of the most vibrant, free media I know, because you pick up the Cook Island News, it's loaded with criticism of everybody and anybody, starting from the Prime Minister down. And no attempt at all to censor the view of the community. This is a fascinating circumstance, because we don't have that level of media freedom here, do we? Given its ownership from abroad, do we? In fact, present company accepted. In terms of taking action and working together, we're pleased that MFAT has worked with NGOs to develop a new partnership model backed by New Zealand dollars 70 million in development funding. This model reflects the Pacific Reset priorities and values, is more strategic, more focused and more efficient, and that delivers greater sustained impact. MFAT will negotiate partnerships with some New Zealand NGOs that have particular capacity to deliver a strategic focused program with sustainable results. MFAT will also fund smaller projects that target specific communities and issues. It doesn't mean that every NGO will receive funding. MFAT will partner with NGOs that are clear about their added value or their value add and can make an impact, especially in the priority areas in the Pacific. We need to build genuine and equal partnerships in the Pacific. We expect that New Zealand's government's engagement with Pacific partners to reflect the reset principles. We want to challenge NGOs to do the same. We also want to encourage you to collaborate, not just with each other, but with the private sector and Crown research institutes to maximise our collective New Zealand impact. And I suppose we need to do things with far greater urgency. Time and tide in the Pacific does not wait for any people, nor should it wait for us. No one organisation or sector alone can support the Pacific to resolve all the economic, social and environmental problems or make good on the opportunities that exist. We also need New Zealand NGOs to support a localisation agenda. We should be supporting the flourishing of independent and strong NGOs in Pacific countries. This may be challenging to some, but this is the right thing to do. And in partnering to deliver overseas development, we need to better tell the story of the difference that our work is making to hard-working New Zealanders beyond the Beltway. People out there work 2 and 3 jobs and pay their taxes. We need to tell them why we're doing this and why it's important for them as much as people in Wellington, or dare I say it, in the media or in foreign affairs. In summary, this is not a time for fiddling around the edges. We can't just accept the status quo given that the Pacific is one of New Zealand's core interests. It's the time to bring innovative thinking and make a difference with our Pacific partners. In terms of taking action, we have high expectations of the NGO sector. We acknowledge the significant contribution you have made to development in the Pacific and beyond. And the days of treating you as pests is over. We expect NGOs to devote more resources to Pacific partnerships, be more innovative and collaborative, and to bring your supporters to join with us in delivering on the Pacific Reset. Thank you for the invitation to be here this morning. And to share the stage